Beyond the borders of Abilene, in the untamed Texas territory, during the spring of 1876, the horizon seemed infinite above Cold Creek's dusty thoroughfare, a settlement too insignificant for proper law enforcement, yet too determined to simply fade away. Dust devils danced between the weathered structures as wind carried both grit and whispers through the narrow streets. Under the shade of Jeb Carter's livestock and trading post, townspeople assembled, some driven by curiosity, others by cruelty, all drawn to the kind of public humiliation that only frontier communities could witness without conscience. Clara positioned herself on the auction block, arms crossed defensively, jaw clenched with determination, though her pulse hammered against her ribs like a trapped sparrow. The dress that had once been her pride now hung loose on her diminished frame, its hem collecting prairie dust like accumulated regrets. 25 years old, widowed for 3 long years, and for 8 agonizing months, something far worse than alone, unwanted. This woman bears no fruit in her womb, bellowed Jeb Carter, his raspy voice cutting through the assembly like sandpaper. Yet she possesses skills in cooking, cleaning, needlework, and keeping silent. We'll begin the bidding at $10. Hushed conversations rippled across the crowd. Several men snickered and nudged their companions. Others feigned indifference while examining her like livestock at market. Clara's fingernails pressed crescents into her palms, threatening to break skin if she maintained the pressure. A mother in the front row instructed her son to avert his eyes, though nobody truly looked away, not when public degradation masqueraded as frontier justice. Behind her composed exterior, Clara weathered an internal tempest. Her deceased husband's relatives had condemned her for their empty nursery, branded her cursed, liquidated her possessions, and ultimately sold her identity. She had diminished from woman to wife to nothing more than property. $8, someone hollered. 6, another countered with laughter. Hell, I'll offer 2 bits and a button if she promises silence. The gathering erupted in cruel amusement. Clara shut her eyes momentarily, imagining herself anywhere but here. Then a voice pierced the chaos. I'll pay 20. Though not shouted, it sliced through the crowd like a gunshot. Every head swiveled. A man stood at the boardwalk's edge, cradling an infant while his other hand rested on a worn leather bag. His clothing was simple but well-maintained, his boots dusty yet cared for. He possessed a quiet authority, someone who spoke only when his words carried weight. Clara opened her eyes and met his steady gaze. He didn't flinch or look away. Someone muttered recognition. That's Ethan Kerrigan. Owns the spread near Twin Ridge. Lost his wife this past winter. The baby in his arms stirred. A girl perhaps 6 months old with wisps of dark hair and drowsy eyes. What's a man want with a barren woman? Someone sneered. Ethan ignored the jibe, stepping forward. $20 in silver, I said. The silence that followed wasn't shock. It was confusion mixed with suspicion. Decent men didn't purchase women, and if they did, they certainly didn't overpay. Jeb Carter cleared his throat nervously. 20 it is, then. Sold to Mr. Kerrigan. Clara remained frozen as Ethan approached the platform, adjusting the infant in his arms. He looked up at her, his voice lowering to address her specifically, though others still listened. You're not merchandise, ma'am. But you appeared to need an escape route, and I've got a home missing more than just kitchen help. Clara stared at him in disbelief. The baby blinked up at her with innocent, judgment-free eyes. Then Ethan did something completely unexpected. He removed his hat and spoke with genuine gentleness. My name's Ethan. This little one's called Kelly. We'd consider it an honor if you'd come home with us. In that moment, the hostile crowd faded from view. All Clara could see was a man who didn't view her as damaged goods, a man who held a child with tenderness the world hadn't yet hardened. For the first time in ages, she felt something beyond shame, perhaps even hope. If tales like this touch something deep within you, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It shows us your heart still rides the range alongside ours. The Kerrigan Ranch nestled between rolling grasslands and the jagged silhouettes of distant peaks. Wind whispered secrets through mesquite and cottonwood groves, while the distant lowing of cattle echoed across the valley like ancestral spirits calling home. The house stood humble yet sturdy, whitewashed planks, a wraparound porch, and chimney smoke curling skyward like an unspoken promise. Clara sat rigidly in the wagon seat as they passed through the entrance gate, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Worn fabric twisted between anxious fingers. The house, the landscape, the man beside her, everything felt overwhelming, too quiet, too uncertain. Ethan had spoken little during the journey, only pausing to check on Kelly, who now slept peacefully against his chest. There were no shackles binding Clara's ankles, no threatening words from her companion, but she had been owned before. She dismounted slowly as Ethan unhitched the horses, nodding toward the entrance. "It's warmer inside. I'll fetch your belongings." Clara hesitated. "What are my duties?" Ethan turned, his tone matter-of-fact. "Help where needed, mainly with Kelly. That's all." She followed the creaking porch boards and the groaning screen door into a home that smelled of firewood and leather, milk and something sweeter underneath, perhaps hope, if hope possessed a scent. The main room contained a stone hearth, 2 worn chairs, and a cradle positioned against the wall. The cradle showed signs of use but had been lovingly crafted. Clara's gaze lingered on it. "She won't rest in it," Ethan said quietly behind her. "Cries unless I hold her." He looked down. "I'm not skilled with her yet." Clara said nothing, approaching to peer at the sleeping infant. Kelly's tiny chest rose and fell with impossible delicacy. Her lashes were long, her fingers curled like unspoken promises. Clara hesitated before gently lifting the child. Kelly stirred and Clara froze. Then the baby looked up and smiled. Not gas or confusion, but a genuine, toothless, radiant smile that cracked something open in Clara's heart. Her arms instinctively tightened, drawing Kelly closer. "She's taken to you," Ethan observed with wonder in his voice. "I know nothing about infants," Clara whispered. "She's unaware of that fact." The moment passed in warm, uncertain silence. That evening, Clara sat in the old rocking chair beside the hearth with Kelly sleeping in her arms. She had intended to lay the baby down, but somehow couldn't bring herself to move for hours. From her peripheral vision, she watched Ethan in the small kitchen, struggling to prepare a bottle. He dropped utensils, spilled milk, cursed softly under his breath. He wasn't graceful or confident, but he never stopped trying. Later, after warming the bottle, he took Kelly from her arms and attempted to rock her. Clara watched him hum tunelessly while bouncing awkwardly. Kelly fussed and squirmed. Ethan looked lost. "She responds to whispers," Clara offered gently. Ethan smiled with exhaustion. "Is that so?" He tried again, and gradually Kelly calmed. That night, Clara lay wakeful on the cot in the small guest room. Outside, wind howled across the prairie like something wild. Inside, all was peaceful, and she contemplated the man with calloused hands who had offered her shelter without demanding anything in return. She thought about the baby who smiled without judgment, about how, for the first time in years, her touch had significance. She could depart tomorrow. No one would prevent her. But in the stillness, she realized she had no desire to leave. Not yet, perhaps never. She wasn't here from desperation. She was here because of a baby's smile and because something deep within whispered, "You still have value. You still belong somewhere." The week slipped past like wind across tall grass, unnoticed until you looked up and saw how far the shadows had traveled. On the Kerrigan ranch, days began with the rooster's call and ended with the gentle creaking of a cradle. And in the quiet between, something wordless began to flourish. Ethan spent mornings in the pastures, repairing fences or riding the range. Clara relearned bread making, how to warm milk without scorching it, and how to comfort Kelly when she whimpered from nightmares only infants could see. Their rhythm wasn't choreographed, it simply evolved naturally. One overcast afternoon, Ethan returned early to find Clara mending by the hearth while Kelly napped. The aroma of something warm and buttery filled the house. She slept through the thunder, Clara mentioned without looking up. "I believe she trusts storms now." Ethan nodded slowly. "You have that influence, I suppose." He didn't elaborate. He rarely did. But as the storm intensified that night, Clara found herself wondering what tempests he had endured. The answer came unexpectedly. Days later, they sat on the porch watching lightning dance along the far ridge. Kelly cooed in Clara's arms, her tiny hands reaching for rain that hadn't yet fallen. Ethan cleared his throat. "My wife's name was Annabelle." Clara turned her head. "She died bringing Kelly into this world. Lost too much blood too quickly." He stared at his boots. "Never even got to hold her daughter." Clara's voice was soft. "I'm deeply sorry." Ethan nodded slowly. I was furious with God, with myself. Thought if I'd done just one thing differently that day, she'd still be here. Silence stretched between them. She always wanted a daughter. Said she'd name her Kelly if we were blessed with one. Clara rocked gently. She would be proud of you. Ethan gave a bitter laugh. You haven't seen me attempt to change a diaper. I've witnessed worse, Clara said, smiling. The following evening, Clara found herself at the fence line as Ethan wrestled a crooked post into position. Rain fell in gentle sheets, soaking his shirt and plastering his hair to his forehead. He worked without complaint. Clara returned to the house and came back with his coat, extending it. He looked up, surprised. You'll catch cold. He accepted it, nodding. Thank you. It wasn't much, but it was more than nothing. Later that week, Clara was rocking Kelly to sleep when the baby grew unusually fussy. Clara tried humming, but her voice cracked. Tears came unexpected and sharp. She attempted to turn away and hide them, but footsteps approached. Ethan didn't speak or question. He simply sat beside her. The fire crackled. Kelly settled. Clara wept silently, not for what she'd lost, but for what she might still deserve. In the dim glow of the hearth, she whispered, "They called me Barren, like drought-stricken land, useless, dry." Ethan didn't move, but something in his posture softened. "You're not," he said, almost inaudibly. The following morning began ordinarily. Ethan was with the horses, Clara in the kitchen with Kelly, humming while mashing apples into pulp. She turned briefly to stir the pot on the stove. Then Kelly screamed, the kind of scream that had nothing to do with hunger or sleep. Clara spun around and froze. A rattlesnake, long and dark, had slithered onto the windowsill and dropped silently into the room. Its tongue flicked as it coiled near the cradle, eyes fixed on Kelly, who now sobbed in terror. Clara acted on instinct, grabbing the iron skillet from the stovetop, still hot, and lunged. One strike, then another, then another. The snake writhed and hissed, but Clara didn't stop until it lay motionless beside the cradle. She dropped the skillet, breathing raggedly, hands trembling. Kelly reached up for her. Clara scooped her up, pressed the child to her chest, rocked her back and forth while murmuring, not words, but pure instinct. Kelly quieted, nestling close as if she'd never been frightened. Ethan burst through the door moments later, rifle in hand. "I heard—" His eyes fell on the dead snake, then on Clara holding his daughter like something sacred. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Clara looked down at Kelly and realized something fundamental had shifted. This wasn't just a child she was helping with anymore. This was her girl now. Whether by blood or not, a bond had been forged, not by law, but by choice. For the first time since arriving, Clara no longer felt like she was borrowing someone else's life. She was living her own. Cold Creek was small, but gossip traveled fast. Faster than horses, faster than reason, and far more dangerous. Within 2 weeks of Clara's arrival at the Kerrigan Ranch, her name had become common. Conversation beneath whiskey breath and behind lace curtains. "They say he purchased her at the auction house," one woman whispered. "In the general store, and she can't even bear children," another added, shaking her head while weighing potatoes. "What kind of man wants a barren woman when he has a baby to raise?" The men were crueler. "Must be mighty lonely out on that ranch," a ranch hand chuckled to his friends on the saloon steps. "You'd think a man like Kerrigan could do better." They laughed. Ethan seldom came to town. He had no patience for crowds, especially ones that turned vicious. But word reached him. It always did, and Clara felt it more than heard it. In the way conversation stopped when she entered the mercantile. In the sideways glances and false sweet smiles. In the rustle of whispers just behind her back. She endured it silently for days, carrying Kelly through town with her chin raised, trying not to notice the stares. But inside, old wounds reopened. The same ones that had bled when her husband's family cast her out. The same voices suggesting she was less of a woman. One night, as she tucked Kelly into her cradle, she lingered longer than usual. Watching the baby's chest rise and fall, watching her fingers twitch in sleep as dreams danced through them. Ethan found her in the darkness, motionless. "You're considering leaving," he stated. Clara didn't answer immediately. Then softly, "I don't belong here, Ethan. Not to them." "Not to you," he approached but didn't touch her. "You don't belong to anyone, Clara. But that doesn't mean you don't belong somewhere." The next day, Ethan rode into town, tying his horse outside the saloon just as the usual suspects lounged in their usual spots, sipping brown liquor and spreading brown lies. "You come to purchase another one?" Someone joked, raising a glass. Ethan turned slowly. The atmosphere shifted. He stepped forward, boots thudding heavily on the wooden steps, stopping beneath the awning. "She's under my roof," he said, voice steady but sharp. "She tends my child, prepares my meals, listens when I speak, and speaks when she chooses." The men fell quiet. "If any of you has something worthwhile to say it to me directly. Otherwise, keep your mouths shut." A long silence stretched across the porch. Inside the saloon, chairs scraped quietly against the floor. No one wanted to be the target of Ethan Kerrigan's attention when his patience wore thin. One man, older and missing 2 fingers but full of false courage, tried to laugh it off. "We meant no harm, Kerrigan, just joking around." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "Want to joke about someone? Find another target. Clara has shown more grace than any man in this town." He waited. No one spoke again. Then he turned and walked away, wind picking up as he mounted his horse and rode back toward the ranch. That evening, Clara stood on the porch, arms wrapped tightly around herself. She watched him ride in, dismount, and tie the reins with practiced ease. "You went to town," she said. He nodded. Her voice trembled. "What did they say?" "Not much," Ethan replied. "Not anymore." Clara looked at him, really looked, and in his stillness, she saw something stronger than fists or fury. She saw a man who didn't just defend her reputation. He claimed it. Not as possession, but as promise. No man had ever done that, not even her husband. Her throat tightened. "I don't know what to say," Ethan shrugged. "Don't say anything." But she stepped closer, her voice barely a whisper. "Thank you." He looked down at her, eyes steady. "You're not alone here, Clara. Not anymore." In the silence that followed, something shifted between them. Not spoken, not touched, but understood. For the first time in her life, Clara felt what it meant to be truly protected. Wind howled long before rain arrived, bending trees like prayers toward the earth. Thunder cracked over the plains loud enough to rattle dishes in the cupboard. The sky turned black by afternoon, and by dusk the storm had found its fury. Lightning illuminated the hills, revealing broken fences and panicked cattle. Ethan was already in the barn when Clara heard the first snap of splintered wood. She rushed out coatless, skirts clinging to her legs, rain stinging her face like needles. In the distance, she could see Ethan struggling to free a steer from collapsed fencing, mud up to his knees. "Ethan!" she called through the storm. He didn't look up, too focused on coaxing the animal free without further spooking it. Another lightning bolt cracked nearby, and the cattle bellowed. Clara didn't hesitate, wading through muck and wind to join him, grabbing rope, anchoring the gate. Together they moved as one, no plan, just instinct and survival. By the time the herd was calm and the worst damage patched, they were soaked through and shivering. Ethan limped slightly with a gash on his thigh, but refused assistance. They returned to the house in silence, dripping and numb. Clara lit the fire with shaking hands. Ethan sat heavily beside it, boots left at the door, steam rising from his clothes. Kelly, somehow still asleep in the back room, was the only thing untouched by the storm. Clara brought Ethan a dry towel and dropped onto the floor beside him, too exhausted to care about propriety. Her hands were scraped, hair stuck to her cheeks, and her bones ached with weariness that ran deeper than the body. For a long time, neither spoke. Only the fire's crackle filled the room. Then Ethan exhaled slowly. "I thought I'd lost one tonight. Big red steer got pinned under the fence." He looked down. "All I could think was, Kelly, if something happened to me out there..." His voice broke in a way Clara had never heard. Raw, quiet. "She's all I have." Clara watched flames dance in the hearth, then said barely audibly, "I used to think being barren meant I had nothing to offer, like I was empty." Cursed. Ethan didn't turn away. "But Kelly doesn't care about that," she whispered. "And neither do you?" He shook his head slowly. "Not one damn bit." For a while they sat like that, so close their shoulders nearly touched, still cautious, still guarded by scars not easily spoken. Then Ethan reached over and laid his hand gently on hers. No pressure, no promise, just presence. Clara looked down at their joined hands, his rough from ranch work, hers cracked from cold water and washboards. They didn't fit perfectly, but they didn't need to. His thumb brushed hers once. She didn't pull away. She leaned her head back against the wall, closed her eyes, and let the warmth of fire and his touch settle the trembling in her chest. Neither said, "I need you," but both felt it. And for the first time, it didn't feel like weakness. It felt like truth. Dawn's stillness was shattered by distant hoofbeats, too many to be cattle. Clara was in the kitchen when she heard it. Not thunder, not weather. Riders. Ethan was already saddled before she reached the door. "Stay inside," he said, eyes locked on the horizon. "Take Kelly, barricade the back door. What is it?" "Rustlers. 3, maybe 4. They've been hitting ranches north of here. Looks like our turn." Clara's breath caught. She grabbed Kelly from her cradle, wrapped the baby tight in a wool shawl, and rushed to the cellar steps. She paused long enough to retrieve the rifle from above the hearth. Ethan's older one, heavier than she remembered, but loaded. Outside, gunfire cracked. The ground trembled beneath pounding hooves. Clara held Kelly close in the cellar, heart hammering louder than the recent storm, a scream. Not Ethan. She set Kelly down gently in a laundry basket, kissed her forehead, then climbed out with the rifle clenched tight. The sight on the front lawn stopped her breath. Ethan had taken cover behind the water trough, blood seeping from a gash on his temple. One rustler had circled around and now stood with gun drawn, preparing to fire. Clara didn't think. She raised the rifle, stepped onto the porch and shouted, "Hey!" The man turned as Clara fired a shot into the dirt at his feet. He jumped back startled, losing his aim. Ethan lunged from behind the trough, tackled him and wrestled the gun free. Another rider saw the commotion and fled toward the gate. Within moments, the fight was over. 2 men tied up, one escaped, one wounded and groaning by the fence. Ethan stood, breathing heavily, blood dripping from his brow, and turned toward the porch. Clara still held the rifle, arms trembling. "I didn't mean to," she began, but he was already moving toward her. "You did exactly what was needed," he said. "You saved me." Wind picked up, scattering dust across the yard. Word of the attack spread quickly through Cold Creek. By the next afternoon, folks from town arrived to see the aftermath. The sheriff, late as always, took the prisoners into custody. But the real story, what stuck in people's minds like splinters, was Clara. She shot at a man, defended the ranch. Kerrigan's girl didn't even cry, they said. Just watched her mama save the day. Mama. The word traveled around the saloon, through the general store, even to the preacher's steps. The same townsfolk who once whispered Clara was useless now said her backbone was steel. But Clara didn't care about their talk anymore. That night, as she held Kelly and rocked slowly by the fire, Ethan sat beside her with a stitched brow and silent admiration. "You didn't just save me," he said at last. "You saved all of this." Clara looked around, the walls, the cradle, the man beside her, and realized he was right. This wasn't just his land anymore. It was theirs. 3 days after the gunfire faded, a letter arrived by stagecoach, its envelope stiff and foreign in Clara's hands. She opened it slowly on the porch, eyes scanning elegant cursive from a woman she'd once worked with in Fort Worth, a distant cousin to her late husband's family. The message was clear. "We heard of your situation. We could use help in the house, room and board, fair pay, quiet company, a fresh start." It was polite, even kind, and it offered Clara something she hadn't felt since her wedding day. Social legitimacy, escape from whispers. A place to be seen as useful without Cold Creek's baggage or her present circumstances' strange truths. That evening, she stood by the fireplace, letter folded in her apron, words weighing heavy on her tongue. "I received a job offer," she said finally. Ethan looked up from oiling hinges on Kelly's cradle. He didn't speak, just waited. "In Fort Worth, they want a housemaid. Nothing special, but it's a clean slate." Across the room, Kelly sat on the rug with her wooden toy, babbling to herself. She looked up when Clara said, "Fort," her brows furrowing in confusion. Clara knelt down. "Just for a while, sweetheart. Maybe. I don't know yet." Kelly crawled over and clung to Clara's skirt, soft whimpers rising. "It's all right," Clara whispered, stroking her hair. "You're all right." But Kelly wouldn't release her grip. Ethan stood. "You owe us nothing," he said gently. "Not me, not her." "You deserve happiness, Clara, wherever that might be." She looked at him. shirt sleeves rolled, hands still stained with oil and soil. Those hands had saved her more than once, sometimes without even touching her. He didn't plead or beg. He only waited. At night, Clara lay awake listening to ranch sounds, the creak of old wood, wind pushing against window panes, the soft breath of a child asleep in the next room. She stared at the ceiling, the letter resting on her chest like a stone. Fort Worth was clean, safe, expected. But as her eyes fluttered shut, all she could see was Kelly's little hands reaching for her. All she could feel was the quiet weight of Ethan's presence at her side whenever the world grew too loud. Morning came with soft light creeping through shutter cracks. Clara folded the letter again, but this time she slid it into the fire. It curled and blackened, the ink vanishing before the flames. She turned just as Ethan walked in, coffee mug in hand. Surprised by the scent of burning paper. "You made your choice," he said softly. Clara nodded. "I'm not leaving." Ethan held her gaze for a long, still moment. Then finally he smiled, not with triumph but with something much quieter. Relief. A year passed like the turning of seasons, quiet, steady, full of unnoticed miracles. The Kerrigan ranch breathed with new life. Fences stood strong, the barn wore fresh red paint, the pasture swelled with healthy cattle, and the vegetable garden behind the house, once half forgotten, now bloomed under Clara's steady care. Inside, the air smelled of bread and laughter. Clara moved through the house with quiet purpose, her voice soft as she hummed lullabies to a now toddling Kelly, who followed close behind with wobbling steps and ribbons constantly coming loose in her hair. "Mama!" Kelly would cry when she wanted to be held, and Clara never hesitated. Not once. In town, the whispers had changed. The same women who once judged now watched Clara with different eyes as she bargained with the butcher, held Kelly on her hip, or stood beside Ethan at the feed store with her chin up and her apron dusted in flour. "That one's got backbone," folks said. "Kerrigan's lucky." No one asked any more about the day she was bought. They knew better now. She hadn't been purchased. She had been chosen, and she had stayed. The wedding never happened. Not in the church, not under any preacher's eye. There were no white dresses or flowers, no rings exchanged before crowds. What they had was quieter, stronger. One evening, as the sun dipped behind hills and cast golden light across the front porch, Ethan brought out a pot of stew and 3 bowls. Clara followed with cornbread and a jar of pickled carrots. Kelly ran between their legs, giggling, her hair wild from the wind. They sat down together at the table Ethan had built with his own hands. 3 wooden chairs, one still too tall for their smallest member. "Sit up now," Clara said, helping Kelly into her seat. The child beamed, cheeks round and sticky with honey. Ethan watched them both, spoon in hand, his heart feeling like it could break from the fullness of it all. Clara caught his gaze. He reached across the table and placed his hand over hers, rough, warm, familiar. No words were needed. When dinner ended and dishes were done, Clara stepped onto the porch with Kelly in her arms. The child yawned, heavy-lidded, curls clinging to Clara's shoulder. Ethan came behind them, standing close. The wind had stilled. The sky was painted in fire and rose, the sun dragging its heels as if it too didn't want to leave. Clara looked out at the land, not just his land anymore. Their land, their story. Kelly shifted in her arms, sighing into sleep. Ethan reached out, placed a hand gently on Clara's shoulder. She leaned into it without thinking, and there they stood. 3 figures against the edge of the world, wrapped in silence and belonging. The frontier hadn't tamed itself. The world still judged. But here in this place of wind and cattle, of firelight and storms, they had built something no one could take. Clara had not given birth to Kelly, but she had raised her, loved her, fought for her, and in every real way that mattered, that made her mother. She had not asked for Ethan's love, but she had earned it. And he had earned hers, not with grand declarations, but with steadiness, with quiet honor, with the simple, profound act of staying. As the last light vanished and stars broke open overhead, Clara pressed a kiss to Kelly's forehead, then looked at the man beside her. They had grown close over descent, over night, over days, and she smiled, because love, real love, was not in blood or law. It was in choosing each other again and again, even when the world said you shouldn't. Out here in the Wild West, love didn't always arrive in wedding dresses or ride in on white horses. Sometimes it came in storms, in a child's laughter, in a man's quiet strength, and in a woman's choice to stay. Not because she had to, but because her heart had finally found home. Clara was never just a widow. She was a mother by love, a partner by courage, and the heartbeat of a ranch that once stood empty. If this story stirred something in you, if it reminded you that love is built, not bought, then go ahead and hit that subscribe button to let us know you're riding with us.